So now somebody's telling us that niacin causes heart attacks. Really? You probably heard or have seen the news about this new study that came out saying that niacin causes heart attacks, heart disease. I have a couple of big problems with this type of news. First, there's the misinterpretation, the misinformation, and we'll get into that. After the news came out, there are people saying that there is no question that niacin supplementation, which has dozens and dozens of studies showing it to be cardioprotective, is without a doubt actually dangerous and causes heart attacks. How could the evidence flip so quickly? What's the reality that niacin, when the reality is that niacin has a ton, again, dozens and dozens of studies showing that it prevents heart attacks. So there are a couple of clear facts. The first one is that niacin does prevent cardiovascular disease. Here's the second fact. Niacin is not risk-free. Now, I said I had a couple of issues. The first is the misinformation, and the second one is this. We're continuing to neglect the number one cause of heart attacks, heart disease, strokes. It's insulin resistance. And guess what? These two topics are actually related. This continued habit of ignoring the causes of insulin resistance and this misinformation about niacin. So, as Jesus would say, why don't we take the cat out of the bag here? Is niacin causing heart attacks? The short answer, again, is no. The second question, is niacin 100% risk-free? The short answer is also no. Niacin it can cause liver inflammation. It can also cause transitional insulin resistance. So there are some key facts here. Let's dig a little bit deeper. But from hearing the side effect information that you get with niacin to say that it causes heart attacks, again, it's just plain silly. Today we're going to discuss what actually happened. We're going to go to the source. It's a good journal. The authors should have known better. We see that all the time. Authors come in with half a picture and jump to conclusions. But in this case, Nature magazine is well known for having really good judges as well. We're going to go into discussion of what they actually saw, where they got their information, and how you should be thinking about this. Maybe the problem is not niacin, and clearly maybe not niacin supplementation. Maybe it's that niacin is a bioindicator. It's an indicator for people that are eating. What would they be eating? What is in the standard American diet that is supplemented and fortified with niacin? Grain products, processed grain products, breads, pastas, cereals. In fact, if you look at the top 10 niacin fortified cereals, here's some of the names that you see. Quaker Instant Oatmeal, Captain Crunch, Ralston. So cream of wheat. So again, maybe this is not so much niacin supplementation. Maybe this is the standard American diet. And the authors have just found a bioindicator for it. So Jesus, I hope I didn't spill too many beans. Why don't you go ahead and take us from here?
I think, Dr. Brewer, that you started a little bit nervous, but that's okay. You have only been doing this for 4 years on YouTube, right?
I know. And it's trying to work all this technology these days.
No, that's okay, Dr. Brewer. And we have Heather with us today on the show.
Good
Uh,
morning.
we're glad to have you here, Heather. Today we're gonna talk about multiple things. Let me go ahead and share one of a screen. I'm gonna take over for a second, and technology, and let's talk about that article. Dr. Brewer gave an introduction about um, how can you convert the information on a recent article, which is a really good article, and then send that to the news, to the mainstream media, and that ends up translating in something that is not necessarily what the authors of the article said. And it has happened before with niacin. We're going to talk about that in a second. But there are some key facts that you want to consider that are very likely to be true. So first of all, niacin, it is an essential micronutrient. It is foods are fortified with it. The role of it on cardiovascular disease are not well understood, and that's partially true. So we know some stuff about niacin. There's stuff that we don't know, and that's when articles like this one came in or come in. Now, the study was a big one. They included more than 1,000 people. And what they found out is that there's one substance that comes from niacin, which is called niacinamide. And when you have an excess of niacinamide, you end up producing two substances. In this case, we're going to just name them for short 2-PY and 4-PY. And the authors of this article said, well, it seems that these two substances, 2-PY and 4-PY, might be associated with 80% more cardiovascular risk. So that just triggered the alarms and said, well, this is something that a lot of people are already supplementing with niacin. It seems that niacin produces these two substances that should be dangerous. That's what we're going to try to find out today. Let's talk about the specifics on the article. But before we go there, you know what I'm going to do. I appreciate your patience. We have a quick word from our sponsor today, which is us. We have a conference in Dallas, April the 18th and 20th. You should know by now. Seats are going out faster than we thought. We are more than halfway through it. And also the Sheraton Dallas Hotel, where this event is going to be hosted, it's also running out of rooms. So don't miss out. I was corrected last week. The early bird is not finishing on March the 20th, it's finishing on March the 22nd. So, in order to have more information about what you should expect, did you come join us in Dallas on April? Here's Heather.
So, at our last conference, we had a great time. It's an opportunity for you to be live and in person with myself and Jeannie, Dr. Brewer, and Dr. Vega. And we present several different topics to discuss. And you have the opportunity to have a Q&A session. Jeannie and I also take the opportunity to apply the continuous glucose monitor, the CGMs on, during the conference. And you just have that opportunity to mingle with us. There's breakfast that we have prior to the day getting started. We have lunch. We're kind of available during that time, as well as at the end of the day. So it's just a great opportunity. To me, it's better than the YouTube videos are great, but it's a good opportunity to really be live and in person and collaborate with us, one-on-one, and get to know fellow members, attendees that are in the same situation. So there was a lot of bonding and, collaborating amongst the members at our last conference. So it's a great opportunity, good experience all the way through.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And that, Dr. Brewer, don't fall asleep too much, Dr. Brewer. We need you. We need you awake. So, do you
I'm
want to say something
thinking,
about the event? Something real quick, so we can move on to the topic.
I do. Again, it's thank you for the words from our sponsors, who is us. But again, I think the critical piece is to understand this is really more of a pop-up clinic than it is a conference. You don't just sit there and listen to people talk. You're getting your labs. You're getting your CIMT. You're then taking a couple of days of a very, very deep dive to understand your own metabolism, your own level of metabolic health.
Sounds wonderful. So don't miss out. April the 18th to the 20th. Call 859-721-1414 or go to PredMedHealthEvents.com. Thank you so much. So let's go talk niacin. So this is what's on the same Nature magazine article. And this is just some historical facts. During the Great Depression, pellagra, which is a disease caused by vitamin B3 or vitamin B deficiency, remember niacin is B3 vitamin, there were a lot of people just dying from it. And the solution that was taken at the time, because this was a really important public health issue, was to fortify the more common meals with this B3 vitamin. And as Dr. Brewer introduced to you, which were the more common meals, or which are the the meals that have the most niacin on it? Flour and cereals. And now ultra processed foods have tons of niacin on them. So what we acknowledge is that over time, pellagra is not longer that concerned like it would used to be during the Great Depression. Still, processed foods and grain products are extremely fortified with B3 on it. And then if you put that on top, somebody who has a really high carb diet, plus supplementing with niacin because they heard that it was popular and it is good for your heart, yes, you might have an overdose of niacin. That's for sure. Now, there's one thing that is called the niacin paradox. And the niacin paradox refers to one of the benefits of niacin decreasing LDL. But it didn't turn out to be something that decreased cardiovascular death. So it seems like LDL alone was not enough, and they were blaming that on niacin rather than on LDL. And the HBS2 trial and the AIM-HIKE trials have been used kind of to back up that claim that niacin actually doesn't work. And I know Dr. Brewer has his own perspective on it and a couple of videos on those. Do you want to mention something about these two trials on niacin, Dr. Brewer?
Sure. I've got a whole series of videos on this topic, and especially covering the AIM-HIKE and HBS2 trials. On one of them, the bottom line was it was, I think, Merck or one of the big pharma had noticed that niacin does help and work in terms of in terms of cardiovascular prevention. So big pharma did what big pharma does. They were looking to co-opt supplements that were being used, just like they did with red rice yeast and so many other supplements. Change it, manipulate it a little bit, and develop it where they could turn it into a prescription drug. What they did was they added lopropriant. Lopropriant is a chemical that's known to do away with niacin flush. You see, niacin is actually a prostaglandin. A prostaglandin is a locally acting hormone. It's a locally acting hormone that increases, it vasodilates, it increases the diameter of the arteries. That's what causes the flush. So most people that have taken niacin before are familiar with niacin flush. I remember long before, gosh, this was over 30 years ago, I first heard about it before I even went to medical school. I remember sitting there in choir practice one day and I felt like somebody was just taking my scalp off. And that's what it was. I had heard about niacin. I decided to try it. And I was getting a niacin flush. So the big pharma takes niacin, wants to make it into a prescription drug, adds lopropriant. And guess what? They did their clinical trials and they found out that it didn't work. Well, lopropriant not only gets rid of the flush, it also gets rid of the active mechanism. On the other trial, basically there was some confusion in terms of our favorite topic, confusing diabetes, prediabetes, and the risks associated there. So, yeah, it's gosh, what, half a dozen videos I have on that. I would take over a 2-hour show if I went deep into that. But that's the summary of what happened with those two.
So,
At
so
the,
yeah, go ahead.
I can't resist. So at the end of the day, what ended up happening was the American cardiology community and the European cardiology community went separate ways. The Americans said, okay, you know what, we're not going to use niacin so much. The European Cardiology Standards Committee kept niacin in their standards. So again, as you see, there's a lot of detail, as you've mentioned a couple of times. You're just talking about detail on the studies themselves. There's a lot of detail in previous studies about this entire niacin debate.
And I remember you mentioning that there was an editorial from these studies where one of the authors said, I'm concerned that this information is going to be misinterpreted and used to say that niacin is actually dangerous and doesn't work. And that's what ended up happening. Even this article that came up in December that we're covering today uses these two trials as evidence to say that niacin might not be working as we thought it was.
Yeah. So, this was one of the times when I was figuring out in terms of technology how to take a clip from another video to include it in my video. I was so proud. I got that. It was the principal author of that study. I think it was the HPS2 Thrive trial. There is a YouTube that shows him being interviewed, just like you said. And he's saying, yes, I was the principal investigator. I know I'm being interviewed for it. I think this is a disaster. There are going to be plenty of people taken off or not given the opportunity to take niacin as the results of this study. And that's a gross misinterpretation of what actually happened. I got that clip. I put it in there, but it's buried in those 2,000 videos. I've tried to find it since then, and YouTube's pretty good at burying stuff.
That's for sure. All right.
Indeed.
So that's kind of the history on it. And this study was a little bit complex on the side that they did multiple analysis and different analysis. They did measure some of these levels on this 1,000 people population. They did some additional testing on mice, and they did identify, and it's a reality according to the results, that 2-PY and 4-PY, which results from metabolism of niacinamide, can elevate VCAM1 and increase inflammation and maybe create plaque. There's evidence to support that claim. Now, it is only because of the niacin. Well, that's the thing. This is a direct quote from that article. Niacin use as a supplement has increased over the years, and it remains incorporated to the base of the food pyramid: flour, cereal, and rice. So is it actually the niacin that you're supplementing with it, or the niacin that you have been taking for a while now? They did some genetic testing. And if you have heard about epigenetics, how diet and other forms of lifestyle can impact the way that your genes are expressing during the years. And we're talking about almost a century of having exposure to niacin on your diet. And also the impact of carbohydrates that can also be related to this niacinamide particle. There are significant limits. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Bird.
Let me interrupt and ask you a question.
Sure.
So basically what you're saying is, this is as obvious and plain as the nose on your face. The big problem, one of the most risky foods out there is highly processed carbs, highly processed grain products. And they're saying it, you're quoting them here. Niacin as a supplement has increased over the years. When they say supplement, it sounds like they're saying it's a supplement added to grain products, right?
It is.
Yep. That's the way I understand it.
So to me, knowing again, looking at this as an epidemiologist, the first question that comes out of my mind is exactly what we brought up on the intro. And that is, Are they not acknowledging? They never mention anywhere in the article, yes, um, highly processed grain products may be the biggest danger in the standard American diet.
They don't say it that way.
Correct.
But they do say that there's a lot of niacin on it, and to some mainstream media credit, some of them are acknowledging that it's the grain products and the processed foods.
So you're starting to see that now. So that's where I was going. If you're, that's, just such a classic um, blind, it's a classic author problem where they look at something, connect two, add two and two together and get five, and refuse to, don't even acknowledge what's right in front of your face. Is this, I mean, if they had gotten a little bit deeper in terms of saying, could this be a biomarker for highly processed carbs? And could that be going on? If they had dealt with that in the article would have been much, much more persuasive. Do you expect to see any editorials coming out of that with people saying asking exactly the question that we're asking?
It's very likely. I don't know if they're gonna ask the same exact question, but if you go to the conclusions of the article, as a lot of evidence-based medicine, the conclusion is the present study suggests there's association. They did some additional um, statistical procedures to try to get the strongest data possible. They included that mice testing to say that 2-py, 4-py create all this damage. But at the end, they said we need more investigation on people without cardiovascular disease, because this is something also that you want to consider. I'm going to use your comment as a segue. 2-py and 4-py were measured only once on the whole cohort. So they did not measure periodically. They just measured once, and they saw how many of those people had cardiac events. The population they choose right from the get-go had a lot of cardiovascular disease and other metabolic risk factors. And they did not know how much niacin they were actually eating or taking as a supplement. So there was plenty of missing information to completely back up this article. I think there's a lot of good mechanistical evidence, which is what you do on the lab. But they saw some people that had high levels of 2-py and 4-py. Then they saw that people were dying higher than the other group. And then they just tested 2-py and 4-py, and they say, okay, yes, this is associated with cardiovascular plaque. But then when you try to connect the dots, the links are just too weak to blame it on supplementation and to transform this information into a supplementation problem. I think the main goal to recognize is supplements can be dangerous. I don't think anybody's going to argue with that. If you have too much of something, there's going to be some risks. But also, we need to take a look at what we're eating, and especially processed foods and processed grains have tons and tons of things that maybe on the 1930s it was necessary to avoid vitamin B deficiencies, but right now we are dealing with an obesity epidemic, and that requires another approach.
So basically, what they did was the authors went in and they selected for a bunch of people that had cardiovascular disease. That's where they got their study participants. They went to tertiary centers who were seeing medical centers who were seeing patients with cardiovascular disease. They were able to access blood samples from these people. So they knew their level of cardiovascular disease. Then they looked at their blood sample. They looked to see if they had these metabolites of niacin. Then they matched metabolites of niacin to cardiovascular disease. They never asked them where they got their niacin.
Exactly. What was the source of the niacin?
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Wow.
So I don't know. There's something else that you want to add to that conversation, Dr. Brewer? It's I think you did a really good summary of what happened in this study.
No, I think it's again, it's classic for epidemiology, closed-minded research.
You know what? It's surprising to me. I mean, we know that research is difficult. There's a line down there on the discussion section of the article where they say, we acknowledge that the model of the cohorts of the groups that we were following doesn't mean causation. That's why we did the additional testing on genetic testing and mice testing. Reminds me to the Mendelian randomization studies for LDL. So
So,
it's hard to establish causation when you have just so many factors being involved on a subject.
Mm-hmm.
are you trying to get me going?
We need to make this entertaining, Dr. Brewer.
as you know, there's the assumption from a lot of some content creators, especially folks that work with the lipidology community, that Mendelian randomization does conclusively prove causation. That's not correct. It does lend towards causation, but it doesn't prove it. And you see other statements about it. So I think what you're referring to is Peter Attia saying there is no ambiguity. ApoB causes heart attack and stroke.
Oh yeah,
go ahead.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate.
Okay.
He also said that sometimes we confuse causation with sufficiency. So now I think now maybe just trying to back up a little bit on the wording, and saying, well, yeah, ApoB causes heart disease, but it's not enough. I think it's kind of the same thing we hear with niacin. Can niacin supplementation, especially if you overdo it and you eat a lot of carbohydrates, increase those two metabolites and put you on a higher risk? I think that's possible. That's why we don't recommend just supplementing just because. It's according to your own specific situation.
Yeah, and to get back to the niacin question, I'm really not, as I've said before on the videos, I'm not too upset and worried about this as misinformation, because I think there's too much misinformation on the other side. I think there are too many people that think, oh, I'm just going to take niacin. You guys know, you see it with our patients coming in. A lot of people just have heard about it. They don't really think through it. Right. And they come in taking niacin when they don't really need it. As we've said a couple of times, niacin is not harmless. It causes transitional insulin resistance, and it can cause significant liver inflammation. I have even heard of deaths associated with liver failure associated with niacin. So it's not a harmless supplement. But again, as you said, you go back into the context of what happened. People were getting little to no niacin. They were getting pellagra as a result. They supplemented processed grain products with niacin, and I know I'm likely to get this video demonetized by mentioning it, but I'm going to mention it again. Captain Crunch.
Right.
It's got what, 7 grams per bowl or something like that. I just looked it up before the show. The top 10 cereals in terms of niacin supplementation. So the other one, we just did this last video on the top 10 sneaky foods that people think are healthy, but they're really sneaky because they're not. Wasn't it number 1? Instant oatmeal.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what else is in the top 10 for niacin supplementation?
Instant oatmeal.
Quaker instant oatmeal. All you have to do with that Quaker instant oatmeal, and it says it right there on the box, just add boiling water or put it in the microwave. And therefore, those you can cook it that quickly. It's that highly processed, and your body therefore can access those carbs within seconds. So to go back and not think through this is just, it's frustrating. That's all.
So now you get me started. So is it oatmeal good or not? Because it says right there, right there on the label, it's good for your heart. But now we're saying that it has a lot of sugar and now a lot of niacin on it. So it turns out it is dangerous.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
That's a loaded question.
I just say I'm being facetious.
Yes.
I don't need oatmeal. So
Well, you are. I do. I don't eat that kind of oatmeal. I mean,
Yeah.
you're getting to one of the key questions. That was a confusing video for a lot of people. We saw a whole lot of these hand signs saying, "What?" And they were trying to understand, because the point was, these are not the foods in that video were not necessarily unhealthy. It was foods that in certain situations can be really, really unhealthy, but everybody thinks they are healthy. And again, oatmeal is the classic. The point behind that one in the video and now is that it's a very, very different thing to have steel cut oats. At the other studio, I actually have two little baggies, one of the flaked instant oatmeal, the other of the steel cut oats. And you can see it. The instant oatmeal is just flakes. Steel cut oats are little round balls, and they take 30 minutes to cook.
Right.
For the same reason that they take 30 minutes to cook, they've got to get through all of that fiber in order to cook the grain. You don't have to get through all that fiber with instant oats. You just kaboom, it's there, and your body doesn't have to go through it either. It just kaboom, and it gets those carbs. So as you can tell, I get frustrated about it, but life is just not that simple.
Well, it is what it is. So before we go to the Q&A, I'm going to just go ahead and ask one thing that I'm pretty sure is going to come in the comments. So bottom line, do you recommend niacin? Yes or no? Why do you recommend niacin if you do? And what's the dosage that you usually recommend?
Heather?
So I think it depends on the patient, obviously. We have patients that come to us that, do not wish to be on a statin type medication. Or they've had, horrible side effects and they prefer not to be on a statin. So just depending on their labs and their diagnostic imaging. But for me, let's say, for example, somebody has elevated LDL, their HDL is low, they may have elevated Lp(a). I would recommend the niacin, Enduracin. And we would start at like a 500 milligram dose once a day and then monitor their labs, check it again in 3 months. If liver enzymes and things look good and they've made some progress on those numbers that we're concerned about, then we can maybe increase that to 500 milligrams twice a day, but continue to monitor.
That's a really good point. When people ask me about it, I usually just bring up the Lp(a) issue. But you've got a great point. In our practice, there are times a few years ago when over half the people that I said, you should consider a low dose statin, they'd say, don't want to do it. And for somebody that's in that category, niacin is the only thing, prescription or otherwise, that we know that can decrease LDL, increase HDL, decrease Lp(a), and decrease triglycerides.
Triglycerides, yep.
So I think Dr. Brewer froze.
Can you still hear me?
Yep.
That's a good pick, though.
That is a good picture.
So let's go to Q&A and let's see if Dr. Brewer unfroze during that period. So Gilbert, can you send us to Q&A? Well, while Dr. Brewer comes back, 15-second reminder for you. Dallas, 18th to the 20th, PrevMedHealthEvents.com, 859-721-1414. If you can put the number right there, Gilbert. Early bird until March the 22nd. You can get a picture with Dr. Brewer, but more importantly, you can get a step forward on your efforts to improve your health. Don't miss out. We'll be happy to see you there. Spaces and spots are running out, so uh, we're happy to see you there.
Absolutely.
So that's it. 15 seconds. I did my best.
There you did. You did good.
Okay, Dr. Brewer, are you back with us?
Well, I'm going to use the other camera right now.
Well, it is what it
You
is.
see me now?
Yeah.
Here you go.
So we cut you off on your recommendation of niacin. Do you want to continue with that?
Yeah.
No, I think we did. I think I got through it. It's the major thing that I think of immediately is LP(a), because the only other thing we have for significant LP(a) is the antisense drugs, and those just aren't ready for prime time yet. So we've known forever that niacin helps with LP(a). And it makes sense because LP(a) is just a genetic variation of LDL. It also makes sense that niacin decreases LDL. And as Heather brought up, there's a lot of people who are worried about their LDL values, but they're even worried even more about like even a low dose statin. So those folks often it's often worth the benefit risk ratio. Again, it's the only thing we know, prescription level or not, that decreases triglycerides, decreases LDL, decreases LP(a), and increases HDL.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It even improves triglycerides.
It does. I forgot to add that one.
Yeah.
It does.
So really good. So Gilbert humored me with my image for a few seconds only. Become a YouTube member. Well, a PrevMed Health YouTube member. I must be more specific. So next to the subscribe button, you can click on join, and the benefits is we're gonna read your questions before others, just like Mr. Clay. Well,
Mr. Clay WK.
Yeah. So he just became a new YouTube member. We appreciate that. Also, hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share it with your friends if you think this is life-saving information, and if it isn't, share it with your enemies. They might use it. Now, let's go see Brad. Supplemental exhaustion, meaning I was taking so many supplements, I just got to be too much. If one is eating well, exercising, sleeping, what are the basic supplements absolutely necessary? That's a loaded question for a whole show, but do you have some insight that we can use for Brad?
So you guys help me. I started off saying I've had supplemental exhaustion as well. All of us should take magnesium supplementation. There's no question that all of us should consider ourselves depleted until and unless proven otherwise, and it's going to be very hard to prove otherwise. How much should you take and what kinds? You should actually take two different kinds. One, magnesium threonate, because it's the only one that'll get through the blood-brain barrier and impact the mental health issues associated with magnesium. But also another type, most commonly recommended, is glycinate, but even magnesium chloride in some versions works just fine. People that are on statins, most people think that, yes, it does make sense for them to take a
CoQ10.
Yeah, CoQ10 or ubiquinol. I would not take ubiquinol. It's over twice as expensive. And the difference between ubiquinol and CoQ10 is just a bioavailability issue. Now, the ones that we use the most often are vitamin D3 and vitamin B3 or niacin. So we've had some, Heather gave a great discussion about when we would recommend niacin. D3 is just based on your levels. D3 is the same thing. It was discovered early on when people had problems with rickets and broken and curved, deformed bones, things like that. The first level of defense was to get to a little bit higher level of D3. But There are tons and tons and tons of data associated. Which is associated.
Does somebody has a bike on you and it's just deflating? What's going on?
Oh no. It sounded like somebody was opening a soda or something. It was fizzy.
What's
Anyway.
going on?
Anyway,
right.
the D3 is up until about 10 years ago, we thought D3 levels of 25 to 40 were okay. At this point in time, based on the new information that's come out over the past decade, it makes more sense to go between 50 and 90. Some people say, no, just go as high as you want. And that's not true. D3 has its dangers as well. B3 can inflame the kidney. D3 can B3 or niacin can inflame the liver. D3 can injure the kidneys. So don't just throw supplements around. Think through what you need. Know the supplement a little bit better than most people do. So I didn't get into K2, berberine, bergamot, cinnamon, garlic, any of those. I've already been talking too much. So one of you come in and help me out a little bit.
Heather, do you have, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I like the D3 as well. And that's something that we also monitor quarterly, because you want to make sure that the kidneys are tolerating that well. And typically you want to take a D3 with a meal, especially a meal that has fat, because it will absorb better. A lot of people that we talk to and patients of ours, they're taking it when they're fasting or on empty stomach, and their levels are still low, even though they're supplementing. And that's often why. But yeah, D3 is a big one. Magnesium as well.
Even though, but I mean, D3 is a vitamin, also behaves kind of like a hormone, and that's why it is too attached to fat tissue. We also recommend methylated B complex, especially if you're having a poor methylation status, high homocysteine. Not gonna go into that deep. But we also, I think I see multiple that are very popular, like ashwagandha, berberine, nattokinase, zinc, vitamin C, chromium. So, and all of those might have something to back that up, but I think they are on the second tier compared to the ones that we just discussed.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on. Rick Folia, has everyone seen the news that Dexcom Stelo CGM will be available over the counter this summer? Wow. I haven't. Have you seen that?
I heard that. I saw the article come across last night. I almost sent it to everybody, but I was going to wait till today. But yeah, they did approve it. The FDA approved it for over the counter.
Well, that's going to make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Huge difference.
I agree.
I can tell you, I think this, I just started experimenting with my own CGM on the past 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It's mind blowing. Mm-hmm. It's like you think you know, and then you put it on, and then you realize, oh, there's just so much I didn't know.
Exactly.
Alan Turner, high doses of niacin can lead to increased blood glucose levels. Does this conflict with taking metformin to control glucose levels? Does the benefits of niacin offset the negative impact on glucose? Really good question. Dr. Burr?
Heather?
Jesus?
I'm gonna go back to you, Dr. Burr.
I'll jump in. Yes, as we've mentioned a couple of times on this video already.
Right.
Niacin.
I see a lot of questions about the blood sugar, so yeah, I'm gonna let you address that.
Niacin can cause some increase in blood sugar. It's transitional. Usually it lasts about 6 months or less. And again, it gets back to that statement that we said before. Don't just take it willy-nilly. Take it if you need it, if you've got a good reason.
Exactly right. And I don't think we have seen cases where insulin resistance sees itself pretty much impacted very negatively just because of niacin. Usually the benefits outweigh the risk, especially if you have very high triglycerides or very high Lp(a).
And I think it depends on the dose as well.
Yeah.
Again, like Dr. Brewer said, you don't just willy-nilly go and take, 2,000 or 3,000 milligrams of that. You got to start slow and kind of monitor.
I see somebody mentioned taking 3 grams, and I would never go beyond 2.
Yep.
And there's no need to start with 2 either. As Heather mentioned, start with 500 or even 250.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons that we can do that is, what we talked about at the Dallas event and what we do all day, every day. We don't just look at at the literature and say, okay, we'll take this. We actually look at what's going on. And with niacin, for example, as Jesus is discussing, we're continuing to watch all of the bioindicators of insulin resistance. We're also looking on a quarterly basis at the bioindicators of cardiovascular disease, and including cardiovascular inflammation. So you can start watching people in terms of cardiovascular inflammation and insulin resistance on one side and cardiovascular disease on the other. That's what we do. And that's how you can go ahead and safely get somebody geared up with something like niacin.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Kit Lawson, follow the money. Now, there's one thing, and I assume that you're talking about the supplement industry and the medication industry. My personal take on that is, I think if we believe that big pharma is an evil corporation and the supplement corporations are just looking for the benefit and the well-being of the population, I think we might be wrong. There is a lot of money involved. I don't have proof. That's just my own perspective on a few things that I have seen, but I won't be surprised that pharma corporations have a grab on supplements industry as well.
Say that again. You wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised that supplement industry is as monetary driven as pharma industry.
Oh, there's no question in my mind.
Now,
and the food industry too, because
our
foods with all of this. Yeah,
exactly right. So even though we support the use of some supplements when you need them, we have said that 1,000 times, supplements will not make you outrun a bad diet or a bad lifestyle.
Correct. Lifestyle is king.
So I rarely watch TV, except I think if it's on for like a Sunday event and somebody's watching football or something. But I saw this a couple of weeks ago. This family was sitting down to dinner, and Tony the Tiger walks up. You know where I'm going, right? Heather's comment about big food. So Kellogg's is taking off. And again, Kellogg's, Captain Crunch, our Quaker Oats, I realize if we're demonetized on the video, that we are. But, this is more important. Yes, now Tony the Tiger's trying to take over dinner. And good for these folks. There are a bunch of people out there now. Have you heard of the reaction that's going on?
I haven't.
So people are starting to boycott Kellogg. They're starting to put out the names of all the companies owned by Kellogg's and say, look, they've got so many people bad enough with a corner on the breakfast market. Now they're going after dinner. So good for them for protesting.
Mm-hmm. That's scary. Ugh.
Oh, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, there's just so much of a culture involved in that. I can tell you for a fact, in Mexico, they did two things with processed foods. They took away all those cartoons from the packages that are driven for kids, and they added some stamps that say that they have a lot of saturated fats, a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of salt on those. And still, people buy them. So we are just too deep into the water at this moment.
We are.
Dr. B, you're talking about food. What are your thoughts on grains like pearl barley? Do you eat it?
So do either of you have comments on that?
I don't.
I do. And again, it's just very minimal. I haven't had pearl barley. I'm not familiar with it. As I mentioned before, believe it or not, I do eat grits and oatmeal, but it's not what you think. Again, I don't eat instant oatmeal. I eat those little round stones, the steel cut things that take half an hour to cook. And yes, I have watched my CGM, measured my blood glucose, and it's very minimal, especially when I had um, um, almond butter. The the grits that I would eat are stone ground grits. Again, you go back 100 years ago, and grits used to come in almost like little blocks, like those round steel cut oats, and the glycemic index for those is less than 5. It's about the same glycemic index as the stones that they were ground with. So, yes, there are places. We also had another complete video on another grain product, Ezekiel bread. And the difference on Ezekiel bread is that the flour, the grains are already sprouted. So the carbs used to provide growth, energy for growth for the seed, are already spent creating more of a plant there. So it's turning into more of a salad and less of a standard processed grain product. Now, to get back to the specific pearl barley, now I will tell you this: when I was looking up the top 10 cereals in terms of niacin supplementation, Ralston malts kept appearing over and over and over again. So I suspect from the question, Woody, that there may be some healthy versions of pearl barley, and maybe the pearl is a description of it. But be careful about malts. Be careful again. It gets back to the other video that you did, Jesus, with Robert Lustig. A lot of these foods are very, very healthy in their natural state, but it's what we do to them. And again, if you've pulverized it and made it to where all of the carbs hit your bloodstream instantly, that's when they become dangerous.
All right. Nothing to add on that discussion, Dr. Brewer. Thank you so much. If you find 500 milligram Enduracin hard to take, consider 250 tablets spaced apart. Yes, that's something that you can also consider. You can start with 250 and go up from there if you want. I had something real quick to share now that we were mentioning the CGM and now that you mentioned the glycemic index. I had the other day some boiled carrots, which are supposed to have a glycemic index of 16. My blood sugar went up to 148.
Wow.
Really?
So that's what I'm saying. I have a I have a problem with glycemic index myself. I don't like it that much. And I'm blurry right now. I'm sorry. I should have been messed up with my camera. Can you take over this one, Dr. Brew?
Yeah, I'm gonna. We've got laser hobbyist. I take magnesium taurate and magnesium L-threonate. Good, together, half and half the daily recommended amount of each. Cheaper that way, as L-threonate is expensive. That's very true. There's also a thing called Magtein, Magtein, and it's a supplier to multiple different magnesium sources, magnesium sellers. Just look on the label, no matter which label you're looking at, see if they have Magtein. Magtein does have some pretty good evidence that it has improved the bioavailability of magnesium.
Great. Kit Lawson, Dexcom or Freestyle Libre?
I see you smiling, Heather. What's your position?
I mean, I have more experience with Freestyle Libre. I think you can wear it longer. It's a 14-day. I think Dexcom is 10, unless the new one is 14. I'm trying to remember if it is or not. But we're very open to letting people try either one. So
yeah,
we mostly prescribe the Freestyle Libre 2 sensor because of the affordability, because insurance is not going to cover it unless you're diabetic on insulin. And then but we're happy to prescribe either one. We can even do the Freestyle Libre 3 if budgeting is not a concern for you, or one of the Dexcoms.
I've got a whole bunch of long stories about it. I uh, can't resist. So in the beginning, Dexcom was the one. They really came out. They were adjustable. They had a lot of advantages over everybody, but the big disadvantage was they were $700. I mean, it was incredibly expensive. Libre came out of the blue with Abbott Labs, and they were like $70. So it was a whole new ball game. It was a couple of years before Dexcom caught up. I just tried the new Dexcom 7 about 6 months ago. Now, it was interesting to go back to the old days when it was the $700 Dexcom and the $70 Libre. I had both on. A Dexcom, I bit the bullet. I paid all that money for a Dexcom. I put it on my belly. I had the Libre on my arm. Believe it or not, the Libre did better. Mm. That was unusual. For most people, the Dexcom did do better. Anyhow, you go to today, and it's exactly the situation that you described, Heather, where the new Dexcoms are very competitive, both in terms of price and in terms of quality with the Libre.
Yep.
Great. I personally like the Libre a lot, but if Dexcom is able to do an over-the-counter, that's going to be a big difference. Now, Woody Woodring, I think we're gonna close with this one, and maybe a shout out to a new YouTube member.
Yeah.
Can you in the future explain more how your pop-up clinic works? Blood is drawn at the event or before? Do you actually sit down with someone to go over your labs, like the CIMT labs? Thank you. Yes. So the way this works is if you enroll before March the 22nd, we're gonna have enough time so your results are available during the event. So what you do is we send you a lab order, you go to your closest lab, get all that stuff done. So by the day of the event, you already have your results with you. We're going to have techs on the event doing the CIMTs. There's a schedule for that. Mm-hmm. And after the event, one day after the event, Dr. Brewer, Heather, and Jeannie will be seeing patients to discuss one-to-one your specific results. So we have packages for that if you want to do that. If you only want to have the CIMT, you can do that as well. You can just have the CIMT and access to the conference or the summit, or you can also just go to the summit itself, and that's the other option. So that's kind of the way it works. You still have to go to your closest quest, so you don't have to be rushed about having your blood drawn at the event. That's weeks before. And Laser Harvest, thank you for giving this information free of charge. 250. I don't know what is QAR. I'm sorry for my ignorance on that space, but I appreciate that. And I saw a couple of questions from you, Laser. I apologize I wasn't able to address them all. I can address this one real quick. Started with a tablet made by a company called ADHD 365, but way too expensive. It sounds like an expensive thing. Mm-hmm. Then moved to a liquid UPS. Grade. Yeah, same as or cheap enough. No problem. I think he's talking about magnesium probably. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there are a couple of options for that as well. We're not married to any company on that regard. And a new YouTube member, Joey T, as well. Thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. Just click next to the subscribe button, and we'll be able to get your questions answered. Remember, no soup for you if you are not subscribed. So, closing remarks before we hit the 1 hour mark.
Yeah, I've got a question to ask you, Jesus. You remember we were talking about the YouTube live shows yesterday?
Yeah, I think so.
So remember what your major theme for me was?
You're like a robot sometimes.
What?
No, we were saying to show more emotion.
Oh, no. Oh, that wasn't the main thing. I tried that and it didn't work that well. But you were saying, Ford, we got to cut it off. We got to get it down to half an hour. And here we're going what? We're going on an hour.
Well, I told the guys the goal today was 1 hour. So we're good.
Is that right?
We're still good.
Well, good.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next week. We'll post the next topic for the next YouTube live. Thank you so much.
Thank you.